The bitter winter wind howls through the remote mountains as Thomas Miller splits wood behind his modest cabin, every swing of the axe a reminder of the life he's pieced together for himself and his young daughter. In the distance, a faint cry pierces the evening air. Through the swirling snow, he spots a dark shape in the frozen lake, a woman clinging desperately to the cracking ice. Without hesitation, he races across the treacherous surface, knowing one wrong step could mean death for them both. As he pulls her from the icy water, her whispered words will set in motion a story that changes everything. I was ready to give up until you showed up. What secret pain drove this wealthy woman to walk onto the ice that day? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thomas Miller's calloused hands moved methodically through the morning routine, stoking the dying embers in the wood stove before dawn could break over the Montana mountains. The cabin's wooden floors creaked beneath his feet, familiar sounds that had become a comfort over the years. A quick glance at the thermometer outside the frost-covered window confirmed what his aching joints had already told him. 15 degrees below zero, and dropping. "Daddy?" Emily's sleepy voice drifted from her small bedroom, right on schedule. His 8-year-old daughter had an uncanny ability to sense when he was starting his day, no matter how quietly he moved. "Morning, sunshine," he called softly, already. Reaching for the tin of hot chocolate powder, their morning ritual. Too cold for school today, they just called. The patter of small feet preceded Emily's appearance, her brown hair a wild tangle around her face, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since birth. She wore the mismatched pajamas she'd insisted on picking out herself at the second-hand store. Purple, pants and a green top with faded dinosaurs. Thomas felt the familiar ache in his chest. She looked more like her mother every day. "Can we build a snowman?" Emily asked, climbing onto one of the wooden kitchen chairs, her eyes bright with possibility. The chair, like everything else in their home, showed signs of wear but had been carefully maintained. Thomas had refinished it himself last summer, Emily helping with the sanding. "After breakfast and your reading practice," he promised, setting her hot chocolate before her in the chipped mug she'd decorated with waterproof markers. "Remember what we talked about? Education first." Emily nodded solemnly, wrapping her small hands around the warm mug. "Mom would want me to be smart," she said, with the simple wisdom of children. It wasn't a manipulation. Emily never used her mother's memory that way. It was just truth, spoken plainly. Thomas turned back to the stove, blinking hard. "That's right, kiddo. Sarah always said education was the key to any door you wanted to open." He busied himself with breakfast preparations, oatmeal with the last of their frozen blackberries from last summer's foraging, and powdered milk reconstituted in warm water. Not fancy, but filling. The bills lay in a neat stack on the counter, where he'd left them last night after Emily had gone to bed. The red final notice stamp on the electricity bill seemed to glow in the dim morning light. His job at the lumberyard paid steady, but between Emily's growing needs and the cabin's maintenance, they were always just one unexpected expense. Away from real trouble. But Emily didn't need to know about that. She had enough to deal with, being the only kid in her class without a mother, living so far from town that playdates were a rare luxury. She never complained, though. Not about the long bus ride to school, or their simple meals, or wearing hand-me-downs. She just adapted, like children do, finding joy in small things, the family of deer that visited their backyard, the shapes she saw in the clouds, the stories they read together every night. "Daddy, look!" Emily pointed out the window, where that snowflakes were starting to fall. "It's like the sky is sending us sugar," Thomas smiled, setting their bowls on the table. "Sweet enough to build a whole family of snowmen once you finish your breakfast and reading." He pulled out Emily's current book from the shelf, a worn copy of Charlotte's Web they'd found at the library sale. As Emily ate and read aloud, Stumbling occasionally over the bigger words, but pressing on with determination, Thomas's mind wandered to the practical concerns of the day. The generator needed checking, and they were running low on firewood. With school cancelled, he'd have to bring Emily along while he gathered more wood from the forest behind their property. She loved these excursions, treating them like adventures rather than chores. Their morning continued with its familiar rhythm: dishes washed, Emily drying while standing on her special step stool, beds made, Emily insisting on tucking her stuffed animals in just so, and warm layers collected for their upcoming outdoor tasks. Thomas helped her with her mittens. The left one had a small hole he needed to mend, and adjusted her knit hat, another of Sarah's lasting gifts to their daughter. "Ready for our expedition?" he asked, zipping up his own worn coat. Emily bounced, on her toes, already heading for the door. "Can we check on Mr. Whiskers's family?" she asked, referring to the feral cat she'd been leaving bits of food for, despite Thomas's half-hearted protests about encouraging wild animals. "We'll see if they're around," he agreed, gathering their tools. His axe, some rope to drag the wood, and the small sled that served double duty for work and play. "But remember, don't get too close, and no touching," Emily finished, having heard the warning many times before. "I know, Daddy. I'm not a baby anymore." Thomas smiled, taking her mittened hand in his as they stepped out into the swirling snow. "No, you're not a baby anymore, but you'll always be my little girl." Neither of them could have known that this ordinary morning was about to become anything but routine. The day's peaceful beginning would soon be shattered by a cry for help that would change their lives forever. The scream came just as Thomas and Emily were checking the old maple grove for fallen branches. At first, it seemed like just another gust of wind, but then it came again, distinctly human this time, desperate and fading. "Stay here, Thomas," ordered Emily, already moving toward the sound. "Count to 100 slowly, then follow my tracks back to the cabin if I'm not back." "But Daddy, Emily Rose Miller, promise me." She nodded, eyes wide, and began counting in a whisper as Thomas sprinted through the deepening snow. The lake came into view through the trees, its surface a treacherous mix of snow and ice. That's when he saw her, a dark shape against the white, one arm stretched out across the ice, the other submerged in the deadly cold water. The ice groaned under his careful steps as he approached. "Hold on!" he called. "I'm coming to you!" The woman's eyes met his, wide with terror, and already showing signs of hypothermia's dangerous lethargy. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Thomas lay flat, distributing his weight as he'd learned growing up in these mountains. The woman's coat, something expensive and utterly unsuited for winter conditions, was weighing her down. Her fingers, clutching the ice, were bare, no gloves, no hat, like she'd never intended to survive this. "Take my hand," he urged, extending his arm. She seemed to hesitate, and for one horrible moment he thought she might let go. "Please," he added softly, "my daughter's counting on me to come back." Something flickered in the woman's eyes, recognition, perhaps, of another soul, who understood loss. Her hand, blue with cold, reached for his. The next few minutes were a blur of desperate effort. The woman was lean but tall, her waterlogged clothes adding dangerous weight. Thomas managed to pull her onto solid ice, then half-carried, half-dragged her toward shore. Her skin was pale as the snow around them, her dark hair frozen in crystals around her face. "My name is Thomas," he said, trying to keep her conscious as they moved. "The cabin's not far, just stay with me." "Catherine," she whispered through chattering teeth. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, "I was ready to give up until you showed up." Emily was waiting at the cabin door, already holding it open, her count long finished. "I got the fire bigger," she announced, proud but worried, "like you showed me." "Good girl," Thomas managed, maneuvering Catherine through the door. "Get all the blankets we have, and put the kettle on." The next hour was critical. Thomas had dealt with hypothermia before. It was a fact of life in these mountains. But Catherine's case was severe. He wrapped her in layers of blankets, removed her wet clothes with clinical efficiency, and positioned her near the fire, but not too close. Knowing that warming too quickly could be as dangerous as the cold itself, Emily helped without being asked, bringing hot water bottles and extra socks, her own small hands checking Catherine's forehead the way Thomas did when she was sick. "Is she going to be okay, Daddy?" she whispered. "We'll do our best," Thomas promised, noting with relief that colour was slowly returning to Catherine's cheeks. Her breathing had steadied, though she drifted between consciousness and something deeper, occasionally murmuring words that made no sense. As evening settled in, Thomas found himself studying their unexpected guest. Even unconscious, there was an elegance about her that seemed at odds with their rustic surroundings. Her manicured nails, the remnants of expensive perfume, the quality of her ruined clothes, everything spoke of a world very different from their own. Emily had fallen asleep in the armchair, worn out from the day's excitement, when Catherine's eyes finally opened with real awareness. She took in the cabin, the crackling fire, the blankets wrapped around her, and finally Thomas, who sat nearby checking her temperature regularly. "You saved me," she said, her voice hoarse but stronger. "You're safe now," Thomas replied simply. "Rest. Questions can wait until morning." Catherine's gaze drifted to Emily's sleeping form, then back to Thomas. Something complicated passed across her face, gratitude mixed with what might have been shame. "Thank you," she whispered, and Thomas saw tears forming in her eyes before she turned toward the fire. He should have been thinking about practical matters, about calling the authorities, about where their guest would sleep, about what this disruption would mean for their carefully balanced life. Instead, he found himself wondering about the designer coat now dripping by the door, about the despair that would drive someone so obviously privileged to walk onto frozen lake, and about the strange twist of fate that had brought her into their lives on this ordinary winter morning. Morning arrived with the soft clarity that follows heavy snow. Catherine woke to the sound of quiet domestic activity, a spoon stirring something on the stove, small feet trying to tiptoe, a father's gentle shushing. For a moment, she lay still, the unfamiliar sensation of hominess washing over her like a warm wave. "Is she still sleeping?" Emily's whisper carried across the cabin. "Let her rest," Thomas replied softly. "Her body's been through a lot." Catherine opened her eyes, finding herself on a worn but comfortable couch, buried under a collection of quilts that smelled of wood smoke and lavender. "I'm awake," she said, her voice stronger than yesterday. Emily appeared at her side almost instantly, holding a steaming mug. "Daddy says hot chocolate fixes everything," she announced with absolute conviction, "even broken hearts." Catherine accepted the mug, meeting Thomas's eyes over his daughter's head. He looked apologetic, but she managed a small smile. "Your daddy. Sounds very wise." "The wisest," Emily agreed, settling cross-legged on the floor nearby. "He even knows how to fix the generator and make spelling fun." Thomas cleared his throat. "Emily, remember what we discussed about giving our guest space?" "It's all right," Catherine said, surprising herself. The child's presence was oddly comforting, an anchor to normalcy she hadn't realized she needed. "I haven't had hot chocolate in—" She paused, realizing it had been since that last morning with Michael and James before the sailing trip. A long time. Something in her tone made Thomas pause in his breakfast preparations. He brought over a bowl of oatmeal, setting it beside her mug. "Emily, why don't you go feed Mr. Whiskers's family? Bundle up first." Once Emily had clattered out the door, Thomas sat in the chair opposite Catherine. "We need to talk about yesterday." Catherine stared into her hot chocolate. "I suppose we do." "I should call the authorities, report the incident." "Please don't." The words came out sharper than she intended. Softer, she added, I'm not missing. No one's looking for me. Not in the way you think." Thomas studied her with those steady eyes that seemed to see too much. "Someone's always looking. Question is whether they care about finding you or just what you represent." The insight startled her. Catherine took a careful sip of hot chocolate, buying time. "There was an accident," she said finally. "2 years ago. My husband and son were sailing. A storm came up suddenly." She couldn't finish, but she didn't need to. Thomas's face showed understanding, not pity, but the deep recognition of shared pain. "Sarah, my wife, it was cancer," he offered quietly. "Emily was 4, quick as these things go. Maybe that was a mercy." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their losses filling the space between them. Outside, they could hear Emily talking to the cats, her voice carrying the simple joy of a child who had learned to live with absence without letting it define her. "After they died," Catherine continued, finding strength in Thomas's steady presence, "I threw myself into work, built the company bigger than ever. Magazines called me the Ice Queen for my corporate takeovers." She laughed bitterly. "If they only knew how accurate that would turn out to be." "That's not who I pulled from the lake," Thomas said simply. "That woman would have let go." Catherine met his gaze, struck by the truth of it. "No," she agreed softly. "That's not who you pulled from the lake. I'm just not sure who I am without the ice." Emily burst back in, bringing a swirl of cold air and excitement. "The kittens came out, and they're so fluffy. Catherine, do you want to see them? I named one after you already, the pretty grey one with white paws." "Emily?" Thomas started, but Catherine was already smiling, her first real smile in longer than she could remember. "I'd love to see them," she said. "But first, I believe I owe your father a proper thank you, and you an explanation for disrupting your morning yesterday." Emily shook her head, snow falling from her hat. "Daddy says sometimes people need help finding their way back. Like when I got lost looking for pine cones last fall, and he used his special whistle to help me find home." She said it with such simple certainty that Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes. Thomas stood, clearing their breakfast dishes. "Take your time," he said. "The cats will wait, and so will we." In that moment, watching Thomas and Emily move around, their small kitchen with practiced familiarity, Catherine realized she felt something she hadn't experienced since losing her family. She felt safe. The storm that arrived that afternoon was the kind that old-timers spoke about in hushed tones. Wind howled through the mountain passes, piling snow in drifts taller than Emily. The temperature plummeted, and the world beyond the cabin's windows disappeared into a curtain of white. "Looks like you're stuck with us for a while," Thomas said, checking the weather radio's batteries. "Roads won't be cleared for at least 2 days." Catherine stood at the window, watching Emily attempt to measure the snowfall with a ruler. Her borrowed clothes, an old flannel shirt of Thomas's and a pair of Sarah's jeans he'd kept, felt foreign and comforting at the same time. "I should feel trapped," she mused. "Instead, I feel safe," Thomas suggested, not looking up from the radio. "Present," she corrected. "For the first time in years, I feel present." The power flickered once, twice, then died completely. Emily's delighted squeal carried through the walls. "Daddy, can we make shadow puppets again?" Thomas was already reaching for the kerosene lamps, his movements sure in the dimness. "First, we check the generator and bring in more firewood. Then shadow. Puppets." "I can help," Catherine offered, surprising herself again. "I may not know generators, but I can carry wood." Thomas hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Emily, get our guests some proper boots. The ones in the mudroom. Top shelf." The boots, it turned out, had been Sarah's too. Catherine slipped them on without comment, but something in Thomas's eyes told her he noticed. They worked in companionable silence, creating a human chain to move firewood from the covered stack outside to the indoor pile. Emily insisted on carrying the smallest pieces, her face serious with concentration. "You're good at this," Thomas observed as Catherine stacked another armload. "Most people from—" He caught himself. "From my world." Catherine smiled wryly. "I grew up in Vermont, actually, before the boarding schools and Harvard Business School. My father believed in practical education." "Did he teach you about generators too?" "No, but I'm a quick study." Catherine brushed snow from her borrowed coat. "Show me." They spent the next hour with their heads bent over the generator, Thomas explaining each component while Catherine asked surprisingly technical questions. Emily watched from her perch on a nearby stump, occasionally offering commentary that made both adults hide their smiles. Back inside, with the generator humming and fresh wood crackling in the stove, Emily declared it was cookie-making time. "We always make cookies in storms," she explained to Catherine. "It's tradition." Thomas started to protest. They were running low on flour, but Catherine was already rolling up her sleeves. "Where I come from, traditions are sacred," she said solemnly to Emily. "What kind of cookies shall we make?" The kitchen became a warm hub of activity. Catherine, who hadn't baked since James died, found herself measuring ingredients by lamplight, while Emily explained the vital importance of proper chocolate chip distribution. Thomas watched them from his spot by the radio, something soft and uncertain crossing his face. "You're staring," Catherine said quietly when Emily went to wash her hands. "Sorry, it's just, she hasn't taken to anyone like this. Not since Sarah." Catherine's hands stilled in the cookie dough. "I'm not trying to—" "I know." Thomas's voice was gentle. "That's probably why. The cookies turned out slightly crooked but perfectly golden. They ate them warm, huddled around the fire while the storm raged outside." Emily convinced Catherine to help her make hand shadows on the wall, a skill Catherine discovered she possessed, much to her own surprise. "Look, Daddy." Emily pointed at the wall, where Catherine's hands had created a graceful swan. "She's magic." "Maybe a little," Thomas agreed, and something in his tone made Catherine's heart skip. Later, after Emily had fallen asleep in her blanket nest by the fire, Catherine and Thomas sat in the lamplight, watching the storm through the windows. "I should be checking my phone," Catherine said, "calling my assistant, my board members. There are meetings, decisions, millions of dollars hanging in the balance. But right now I can't remember why any of that seemed more important than teaching an 8-year-old how to make cookie dough." She turned to face him. "Is that crazy?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "When Sarah died, I learned something about importance, about what lasts. Money, power, reputation, it all blows away like snow in the wind. But the smell of cookies baking, the sound of your child laughing, that stays." Catherine looked at her hands, still dusted with flour. "I forgot how to make things," she whispered. "Real things. Not deals or acquisitions or market share. Just simple real things." "Well," Thomas said softly, "you seem to be remembering." The old TV in the corner rarely saw use, but with the roads still blocked and the internet down, Thomas turned it on for the evening news. Emily was in bed, and Catherine sat curled in Sarah's old armchair, a borrowed book open in her lap. The news anchor's voice filled the quiet cabin. And in business news, concerns grow over the continued absence of Catherine Sterling, CEO of Sterling Innovations. The tech giant stock has fallen 12% since Ms. Sterling's unexpected. The remote clattered from Thomas's hand. On the screen was Catherine's face, not the soft, flour-dusted woman who had spent the afternoon teaching his daughter to bake, but a polished corporate executive in a tailored suit, delivering a keynote speech at some conference. "Sterling," he said quietly. "Catherine Sterling. The Catherine Sterling." Catherine closed her book, her fingers trembling slightly. "Thomas, 30,000 employees, market cap of what, 40 billion? And you're sitting in my cabin wearing my dead wife's clothes, making cookies with my daughter?" His voice stayed low, mindful of Emily sleeping, but the hurt was evident. "I should have told you." Catherine stood, hugging herself. "I wanted to, but this place, these days with you and Emily, it felt real in a way nothing has since I lost my family. I didn't want to break that spell." "Spell?" Thomas ran a hand through his hair. "This isn't a fairy tale, Catherine. This is our life, Emily's life. We're not some rustic vacation from your real world." "You think I don't know that?" Catherine's voice cracked. "You think I don't see how genuine everything is here? How every single thing in this cabin has meaning and history and love worked into it? It's the exact opposite of my life, where everything's expensive and nothing matters." Thomas turned away, staring at the fire. Why were you really on that lake? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Catherine sank back into the chair, all her carefully constructed walls crumbling. The board meeting was that morning. They wanted to take the company in a new direction, more aggressive acquisitions, layoffs to boost short-term profits. Everything Michael and I built the company to stand against. She wiped at her eyes. I fought them, but all they saw was the grieving widow who'd lost her edge, the Ice Queen finally melting down. I drove up here to clear my head, ended up at the lake. I stood there looking at my reflection in the ice, this stranger in designer clothes, and I just started walking until the ice broke. Thomas finished softly, "Until you found me." Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. "Do you know what? I realized making cookies with Emily. It was the first time in 2 years I hadn't thought about the company, the board, any of it. I felt like myself again. Not Catherine Sterling, CEO, or Catherine Sterling, widow, but just Catherine." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. When he finally turned back to her, his eyes were tired but gentle. "Emily's going to have questions when this comes out, and it will come out. I know." Catherine stood again, moving closer to him. "But before everything changes, I need you to understand something. What happened on that lake, meeting you and Emily these days here, it saved more than just my life. It saved my soul." "Catherine, no, please let me finish." She was close enough now to see the firelight reflected in his eyes. "I know I have responsibilities. I know I can't hide here forever. But what I found here, with you and Emily, it's not a spell, it's not an escape. It's the first real thing I've felt since I lost everything, and I'm not ready to lose that too." The silence that followed was broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant howl of the wind. Then from the hallway came a small voice. "Are you leaving us?" They turned to find Emily in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with worry. Catherine felt her heart constrict. Thomas moved first, kneeling before his daughter. "Emily, honey, you should be in bed." "But is she?" Emily's lower lip trembled. "The lady on TV said you're important. Are you going away now?" Catherine knelt beside Thomas, meeting Emily's eyes. "I am important," she said carefully. "But not because of what the TV says. I'm important because you taught me how to make perfect cookies, because your daddy showed me how to stack firewood, because here, with you both, I remembered who I really am." Emily considered this, her young face serious. "So you'll stay?" Catherine looked at Thomas, seeing her own struggle reflected in his face, the desire to protect Emily from more loss warring with the connection they'd all formed. "I don't know what happens next," Catherine said honestly, "but I do know that whatever it is, it has to include cookies." Morning found Thomas at the kitchen table, turning something over in his hands, while the first grey light crept through the windows. Catherine, who hadn't slept much, recognized the glint of gold, a wedding ring on a simple chain. "Sarah wore it on a necklace during chemo," Thomas said without looking up. "Her fingers got too thin for it to stay on." He seemed to be speaking more to the ring than to Catherine. "After, I couldn't bring myself to put it away, kept telling myself Emily might want it someday." Catherine moved quietly to the table, drawn by the raw honesty in his voice. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the chair across from him. At his nod, she sat. "Michael and James were wearing matching sailing jerseys that day," she offered, her voice soft in the dawn quiet. "Blue and white stripes. James had begged for them. Wanted to look just like his daddy. The Coast Guard," she swallowed hard. "The Coast Guard found Michael's, never found James's." Thomas finally looked up, meeting her eyes. "Emily asks about Sarah's voice sometimes, says she's forgetting how it sounded. I have videos, but I haven't been able to watch them yet." "The videos are the hardest," Catherine agreed. "All those frozen moments of happiness, when you had no idea what was coming." She reached across the table, not quite touching his hand where it held the ring. "James had this laugh, like sunshine breaking through clouds. Sometimes I think I hear it in my dreams, but when I wake up, it slips away," Thomas finished. like trying to hold on to water. They sat in silence for a moment, sharing the weight of absence. Then, slowly, Thomas lifted the chain with Sarah's ring. "I've been keeping it in my bedside drawer. Emily doesn't know, but last night, watching you with her—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Sarah would have liked you, I think. She always said Emily needed more people in her corner." Catherine felt tears threatening. "Thomas, I never meant to—" "I know." He placed the ring gently on the table between them. "That's what makes it real. You didn't come here looking to replace anyone. You just fit into all these empty spaces we've been living around." From Emily's room came the sound of stirring. Her usual morning rustling. Catherine wiped her eyes quickly, but Thomas shook his head. "Let her see," he said softly. "She needs to know it's okay to feel things. I spent too long trying to be strong for her, hiding my own grief. Sarah would have called me an idiot for that." "She sounds wise." Catherine smiled through her tears. She was, and she'd be the first to say that sometimes love is bigger than loss. That hearts don't run out of room just because they're broken. Emily appeared in the doorway, sleep-tousled and precious. Her eyes went immediately to the ring on the table, then to her father's face. "Is that Mommy's?" Thomas opened his arms, and she came to him, climbing into his lap like she was still much younger than her 8 years. "Yes, baby. I was just telling Catherine about her." Emily reached out one small finger to touch the ring. "She liked to sing in the car," she said suddenly, "even when she was really tired. She made up silly songs about everything." Catherine started to stand, feeling like an intruder on this intimate moment, but Emily's voice stopped her. "Did your boy like to sing too?" The question, so innocent and unexpected, broke something open in Catherine's chest. "Yes," she managed. "He loved to sing, sea shanties usually. He and his father learned them together." Emily nodded solemnly. "Maybe they're all singing together now, Mommy and your boys." Thomas's arms tightened around his daughter as fresh tears spilled down Catherine's cheeks, but these tears felt different, cleansing rather than bitter, like spring rain instead of winter ice. "Catherine," Emily's voice was small but certain, "when you go back to being important on TV, will you remember us?" Catherine met Thomas's eyes over Emily's head, seeing in them the same question, the same vulnerability. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't think I could forget you if I tried. You and your daddy, you helped me remember who I was before I was important on TV. That's a gift I can never repay." Thomas reached across the table then, taking her hand. The morning light caught Sarah's ring between them, casting small rainbows on the worn wooden table. Outside, the storm had finally passed, leaving the world new and white and full of possibility. The general store in town was the kind of place where news traveled faster than the internet. When Thomas and Catherine walked in that morning, conversations stuttered to a halt, like a record scratch in an old movie. Emily, oblivious to the attention, made a beeline for the penny candy display. "Well, look who's finally made it down the mountain," May Wilson called from behind the counter. She'd owned the store for 40 years and considered local gossip part of her inventory. Her eyes tracked Catherine's borrowed coat and boots with sharp interest. And with company, no less. Thomas felt Catherine tense beside him. They'd needed supplies. The storm had depleted their stocks, but maybe this had been a mistake. Then Catherine surprised him by stepping forward with a warm smile. "I'm Catherine," she said, extending her hand to May. "Thomas and Emily have been kind enough to take me in during the storm." May's weathered face split into a knowing grin. "First company Thomas has brought around since Sarah passed? Must be something special about you, dear?" "The something special is that she makes the best hot chocolate," Emily piped up from the candy display. "Even better than Daddy's, but don't tell him." A ripple of laughter broke the tension. Catherine moved through the store with grace, helping Emily select penny candy while Thomas gathered their necessities. But he could feel the whispers following them, see the furtive glances and poorly concealed cell phones. At the hardware counter, Old Joe Bennett cleared his throat. "Say, don't I know you from somewhere? You look mighty familiar." Catherine kept her focus on Emily's careful candy counting. "I have one of those faces," she said lightly, but the seed was planted. By the time they reached the checkout, May was studying Catherine with new intensity. "You know, my granddaughter was just showing me a magazine article about some big-shot CEO who went missing." "Emily," Thomas cut in, "why don't you show Catherine that view from the front porch? The one of the mountains after fresh snow." Once they were outside, Catherine leaned against the railing, her shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry, I should have realized." "Don't," Thomas joined her, watching Emily make footprints in the fresh snow. "You have nothing to apologize for. The whole town will know by sunset. Your quiet life, your privacy." "Our life hasn't been very quiet since you arrived," he said with a slight smile. "And maybe that's not a bad thing." Inside the store, they could see May on her phone, gesturing animatedly. Catherine sighed. "I should leave before the media descends on you both. Is that what you want?" The question hung between them, as delicate as the icicles dripping in the morning sun. Before Catherine could answer, Emily's voice rang out from the snow. "Look, the newspaper has Catherine's picture." She held up a discarded paper from a nearby bench. The headline read, "Sterling Innovations in Turmoil as CEO's Disappearance Enters Second Week." Thomas watched Catherine's face carefully. "Emily," he called, "bring that here, please." The three of them huddled together on the store's porch, looking. At Catherine's corporate photo, Emily traced the image with one mittened finger. "You look sad there," she said simply. "Not like now." Catherine blinked rapidly. "I was sad then, but not anymore." Emily's question carried all the direct curiosity of childhood. "No," Catherine said softly, "not anymore." The store's door chimed as May emerged, phone still in hand. Her expression was a mix of triumph and concern. "I knew I recognized you. Wait till I tell the Bridge Club that Catherine Sterling herself has been—" "May!" Thomas's voice was quiet, but firm. "Sometimes people need a place to remember who they are, like when you let me and Emily stay in your back room those first weeks after Sarah died." May's excitement deflated slightly. She looked between Thomas and Catherine, seeing something that made her expression soften. "Well," she said finally, "I suppose the Bridge Club can wait. But dear," she addressed Catherine directly, "you might want to call whoever needs calling. News travels fast these days, even in small towns." Catherine nodded, her hand finding Thomas's almost unconsciously. Emily pressed against her other side, a warm reminder of everything she stood to lose or gain. "Come on," Thomas said quietly. "Let's get these supplies home before the new news hits." Home, Catherine thought as they walked to his truck. When had she started thinking of the cabin as home? Catherine's phone, recovered from her car and finally charged, erupted with 2 weeks' worth of notifications as soon as it connected to the cabin's weak signal. The screen lit up like a Christmas tree. 147 missed calls, 293 emails, 89 text messages. Emily watched in fascination as the numbers kept climbing. "Are all those people worried about you?" she asked, peering over Catherine's shoulder at the kitchen table. Catherine stared at the flood of demands, accusations and concerns flowing across her screen. Board members threatening emergency meetings, her assistants increasingly frantic. Messages. The company's stock price falling, competitors circling, 2 years of fighting to protect Michael's legacy, and now some of them are worried, she answered carefully. Others are angry, and some. She paused, reading a particularly vicious email from Marcus Chen, her primary board opponent. "Some are trying to take advantage of my absence." Thomas looked up from where he was making lunch. Vultures circling, more like sharks smelling blood. In the water, Catherine opened an article detailing Sterling Innovations' plummeting stock value. "They think I've had a breakdown, that I'm unfit to lead." Her voice turned bitter. "The Ice Queen, finally cracking under pressure." "But you're not cracking," Emily said with absolute certainty. "You're healing. Daddy says there's a difference." Thomas set a sandwich in front of his daughter. "Emily, why don't you eat in your—" A room. Work on that school project about hibernating animals. Once Emily had gone, Catherine showed Thomas her screen. They're calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. A vote of no confidence. Her hands trembled slightly. Everything. Michael and I built. They'll dismantle it all. Mass layoffs, aggressive acquisitions, exactly what we fought against. So fight back, Thomas said simply, sitting beside her. How? I'm not the same person I was 2 weeks ago. That Catherine Sterling would walk into that boardroom and freeze them all with a glare. But now she gestured helplessly at her borrowed clothes, the homey kitchen, the life she'd stumbled into. Now you're stronger. Thomas's voice was firm. The Catherine Sterling they knew was surviving. The Catherine sitting in my kitchen is living. Her phone buzzed again. Her assistant, David. The message made her catch her breath. Marcus Chen claims to have evidence of financial impropriety. Emergency meeting moved up to 9 a.m. Catherine, please, where are you? He's lying, she whispered. But it doesn't matter. The board's scared, the stock's falling, and I'm... She looked around the cabin that had become more home than her penthouse ever was. I'm here, making cookies and reading bedtime stories. Then use that. Thomas reached across the table, taking her phone and setting it aside. You spent 2 years trying to run your company like the ice queen they wanted you to be. How'd that work out? Catherine met his eyes, understanding dawning. You think I should be the woman who taught my daughter that you can be both strong and soft, the woman who stacks firewood and knows corporate law, the one who made me realize that grieving doesn't mean you're broken. Catherine's phone buzzed again insistently. Thomas handed it back to her. Whatever you decide, Emily and I... He paused, choosing his words carefully. We're in your corner, even if that corner's in a corporate boardroom instead of our kitchen. Catherine looked down at her phone, then back at Thomas. In that moment, she made a decision. Her fingers flew across the screen, composing a message to David. Call an all-hands virtual meeting for 8:30 a.m. before the board meeting. Every employee, every office worldwide. And David? Leak to Marcus Chen that I'm about to surrender. Let him think he's won. She set the phone down, a familiar glint of steel returning to her eyes, but different now, tempered by warmth instead of ice. I need to borrow your truck tomorrow morning. And your Wi-Fi, terrible as it is. If I'm going to save my company, I need to do it from here. From here? Thomas raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Catherine stood, moving to the window where she could see Emily in the yard, carefully documenting a hibernating groundhog's burrow for her project. Michael always said a company was more than its stock price or its acquisitions. It was about people, about building something that mattered. She turned back to Thomas. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Buried it under spreadsheets and profit margins. And now I remember. She smiled, and it held both softness and strength. I'm going to show them exactly who Catherine Sterling is when she's not hiding behind ice. From the yard, Emily's voice carried through the window. Catherine! Come look. The groundhog family is just like us. They're taking care of each other. Thomas stood, joining Catherine at the window. Like us, huh? Catherine's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. Yes, she said softly. Like us. The evening before the board meeting, Emily insisted on a family dinner. For luck, she declared, setting the table with their mismatched plates and Sarah's old china gravy boat, reserved for special occasions only. We should be helping you. Well, prepare, Thomas said, watching Catherine move comfortably around their kitchen, stirring a pot of her grandmother's beef stew recipe. You have a company to save tomorrow. This is preparing. Catherine tasted the stew, adding a pinch of thyme. Michael and I used to do this before big presentations. Cook together, remember why we started the company in the first place. He said boardrooms make you forget what really matters. Emily appeared with a folded paper in her hands, slightly crumpled from nervous fidgeting. I made something for your meeting. She held it out to Catherine. It's my family project for school. Mrs. Henderson said we could define family however we wanted. Catherine opened the carefully folded paper. There, drawn in bright crayon, were three figures standing in front of a cabin: a tall man with brown hair, a small girl with a red bow, and a woman with long, dark hair. Above them, Emily had written in her best handwriting, "My Family, by Emily Miller." "See?" Emily pointed to the drawing. "I gave you the blue sweater you borrowed from Daddy, and look." She flipped the paper over, where she'd written, "Family is people who help you remember how to smile." Catherine's vision blurred. Thomas moved closer, his hand finding the small of her back, a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks. "Emily," he started, his voice gentle. "Catherine has her own—" "It's perfect," Catherine interrupted, pulling Emily into a tight hug. "It's exactly what I need for tomorrow." Later, after Emily was in bed, Catherine and Thomas sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, preparing for the morning's confrontation. The family drawing sat propped against a coffee mug, a reminder of what she was fighting for. "Your board won't know what hit them," Thomas said, reviewing her presentation. Catherine, this is brilliant." She'd spent hours crafting it, not a corporate defense, but a vision. Employee stories, community impact reports, innovation metrics that went beyond profit margins. The human side of Sterling innovations that had gotten lost under quarterly reports and market analyses. "It's what Michael would have wanted," she said softly. "What I wanted before I let them convince me that being strong meant being cold." She looked up at Thomas. "Thank you for helping me remember that. Pretty sure you had it in you all along." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I want you to take this tomorrow." He placed Sarah's ring, still on its chain, on the table between them. "For luck." Catherine's breath caught. "Thomas, I couldn't." "Sarah wore it during every fight she faced," he said quietly. "Chemo sessions, bad news days, nights when the pain was worst. She said it reminded her that love was stronger than fear." His eyes met Catherine's. "Emily was right, you know, about family being people who help you remember how to smile." Catherine picked up the chain with trembling fingers. "What if I lose? The company, everything Michael and I built?" "Then you come home," Thomas said simply. "To us." The word home hung in the air between them, full of meaning and possibility. Catherine fastened the chain around her neck, Sarah's ring settling against her heart. "Emily's project," she said, touching the drawing again. "How long has she been working on it?" "Since that first cookie baking session." Thomas smiled. "She came to me that night, asked if it was okay to love someone new without forgetting someone else. Pretty deep thinking for an 8-year-old. She's her father's daughter." Catherine's hand found his across the table. "Wise beyond her years." "Sarah's daughter too," Thomas corrected. "She gets that wisdom from her mother." They sat in comfortable silence, the cabin creaking softly around them, snow falling gently outside. Catherine's laptop showed the latest email from David. Everything was set for tomorrow's meetings. Her corporate world waited, but here in this moment, with Sarah's ring against her chest and Emily's drawing before her, she felt centered in a way she hadn't since losing her family. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said finally, "these past weeks, they've been real. The most real thing I've felt since Michael and James died." Thomas stood, pulling her up with him. "Then let's get some sleep. You have a company to save in the morning and a family to come home to after." Catherine followed him toward their rooms, pausing to peek in on Emily, who had kicked off her covers as usual. As she tucked the blanket back around the sleeping child, Emily stirred slightly. "Love you, Catherine," she murmured sleepily. Catherine's heart expanded almost painfully in her chest. "Love you too, sweetheart," she whispered back, "more than any company in the world." Dawn hadn't yet broken when the first news van appeared on the snow-covered road leading to the cabin. Catherine, already awake and dressed in a borrowed sweater and jeans, saw its headlights cutting through the pre-morning darkness. "They found me," she said quietly. Thomas appeared beside her at the window, coffee cups in hand. "May Wilson," he sighed. "Had to be. She's the only one who'd know to contact the Seattle business press." He handed Catherine a cup. Small towns have long memories. She worked as a business reporter before taking over the general store. More headlights appeared on the road. Within minutes, the peaceful mountain morning transformed into a circus of satellite trucks, cameras, and reporters trudging through the snow toward their door. "Daddy!" Emily stood in her doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Why are there people in our yard?" Before either adult could answer, a loud knocking rattled the front door. "Catherine Sterling!" a voice called. "Comments on the emergency board." "Meeting. Your response to Marcus Chen's allegations." Thomas moved to Emily, scooping her up. "Back to your room, sweetheart. Remember our plan for when strangers come?" Emily nodded solemnly. "Lock the door, stay quiet, and read my books until you or Catherine come get me." Catherine's heart clenched at being included in Emily's circle of trust. She touched Sarah's ring beneath her sweater, drawing strength from it. "Miss Sterling!" Another voice, another knock. "Is it true you had a mental breakdown? Are you refusing to return to Seattle?" Thomas's jaw tightened. "Use the back door. I'll handle them." "No." Catherine squared her shoulders. "We handle them together. But first," she knelt before Emily, still in Thomas's arms. "Your family drawing. The one you made for my meeting." Emily pointed to her room. "On my desk. Would you mind if I showed it to them? The people outside." Emily's eyes widened. "But it's not fancy, not like your company stuff." "It's perfect," Catherine said firmly, "because it's real." She retrieved the drawing and her laptop, then turned to Thomas. "Ready?" He set Emily down with a kiss to her forehead. "Lock up tight, sunshine. We'll be right back." Together they stepped onto the front porch. Camera lights blazed, microphones thrust forward. Catherine held up her hands, and years of corporate leadership made the crowd fall silent. "My name is Catherine Sterling," she began, her voice carrying clearly in the cold morning air. 2 weeks ago, I walked onto a frozen lake ready to give up everything. Instead, I found something I thought I'd lost forever when my husband and son died." She held up Emily's drawing. "I found family." The cameras clicked rapidly, capturing the crayon artwork with its simple, powerful message. "In 1 hour, I'm holding an all-hands company meeting, followed by a board meeting. I'll be conducting both from this cabin, because this is where I learned what Sterling Innovations was always meant to be. Not just a tech company, but a family of innovators, dreamers, and builders." She felt Thomas's solid presence beside her. As reporters shouted questions, "What about Marcus Chen's allegations? The stock price is plummeting. Are you stepping down?" "Mr. Chen's allegations are as empty as his vision for the company," Catherine replied calmly. "As for the stock price, I care more about the family in this drawing than any number on Wall Street. That's exactly why I'm the right person to lead Sterling Innovations forward." A familiar voice cut through the chaos. "David Wang, Sterling Innovations PR." Catherine's assistant emerged from the crowd, tablet in hand. "Ms. Sterling's statement is complete. She'll be addressing all questions at the all-hands meeting. Until then, this is private property, and you're trespassing on a family's peace." The authority in David's voice, combined with Thomas's steady gaze across the crowd, started the reporters moving back. David approached the porch, professional mask dropping into a relieved smile. "Brought your proper clothes," he said, holding up a garment bag. "Though," he eyed her borrowed sweater and Sarah's ring, glinting at her throat, "maybe this is a better look for the new Catherine Sterling, the real Catherine Sterling," Thomas corrected quietly. David's eyes moved between them, understanding dawning. "The board's already gathering virtually. Chen's looking smug." "Let him," Catherine smiled. "He has no idea what's coming." She turned to Thomas. "Ready to help me save a company?" "Ready to help you fight for your family," he replied. Both families. Inside, they found Emily had unlocked her door and was sitting on her bed, surrounded by her stuffed animals. "Did they like my drawing?" Catherine sat beside her, pulling her close. "They loved it. And in about an hour, 20,000 more people are going to love it too." "That's a lot of people," Emily said, eyes wide. "Yes," Catherine agreed, meeting Thomas's gaze over their daughter's head. But none more important than the two right. Here, David cleared his throat from the doorway, tablet ready. Outside, the media circus continued. But here in Emily's room, with Thomas's strength behind her and Sarah's ring against her heart, Catherine finally felt the Ice Queen melt completely. Away, she was ready. The cabin's small study had been transformed into a makeshift corporate command center. David had worked his magic with portable Wi-Fi boosters and professional lighting, while Thomas helped Catherine position her laptop so the camera caught the wood-paneled walls rather than Emily's craft corner. 5 minutes until the all-hands meeting, David announced, checking his tablet. Chen's people are already spreading rumors that you're having a complete breakdown. The cabin location isn't helping that narrative. Catherine smoothed Thomas's borrowed sweater, her fingers brushing Sarah's ring. Good. Let them underestimate me. It's not the first time. Catherine. Emily's small voice came from the doorway. She held 2 train tickets in her hand. I found these in your coat pocket. The old coat from the lake day. Thomas took the tickets, reading them silently. One way to Vancouver, dated the day Catherine had walked onto the ice. She'd planned everything, disappearing, starting over, leaving it all behind. Emily, honey, he started, but Catherine stood, crossing to them both. Those were my running away tickets, she said quietly, kneeling before Emily. I was scared and sad and thought I needed to disappear, but you don't anymore. Emily's voice wavered slightly. No. Catherine took the tickets, deliberately tearing them in half. Because running away means you have nothing to run toward. And I have everything to run toward now. David cleared his throat. 2 minutes. Board members are logging in. Thomas started to usher Emily out, but Catherine caught his arm. Wait, I want you both to stay. Behind the camera, but I need you here. Emily settled into Thomas's lap. In the reading chair just off screen, Catherine took her position, opening Emily's family drawing beside her laptop. David gave the signal, and suddenly her screen filled with faces, 20,000 employees worldwide, waiting to hear from their vanished CEO. Good morning, Sterling Innovations, Catherine began, her voice strong and clear. I owe you an explanation and, more importantly, a vision for our future. 2 weeks ago, I stood on a frozen lake, ready to leave everything behind. Instead, I found something I thought I'd lost forever when Michael and James died. I found hope. She held up Emily's drawing to the camera. This was drawn by an 8-year-old girl who taught me that family isn't just what we're born into or what we've lost. It's what we choose to build every day with love and purpose. Catherine glanced at Thomas and Emily, drawing strength from their presence. Sterling Innovations was founded on that same principle. Michael and I didn't want to just build technology. We wanted to build a family of innovators, dreamers, and believers. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I let grief turn me cold, let the market turn us from a family into a machine. The chat window exploded with messages of support. Catherine saw tears on more than a few faces in the video grid. Marcus Chen and his supporters will tell you that emotion has no place in business. That family is a weakness. They're wrong. Family is why we succeed. Every parent working late to give their children a better future. Every team member supporting each other through projects and deadlines. Every innovation that makes the world better for families everywhere. She touched Sarah's ring, a gesture that had become automatic. I'm not the Ice Queen anymore. I'm better, stronger, because I remember what matters. In 1 hour, I'll meet with the board to defend my leadership, but I'm not fighting for my position. I'm fighting for our family, all 20,000 of us. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The chat filled with that "We're family" messages. Employees held up their own family photos, their own stories of why they chose Sterling Innovations. Thank you, Catherine said softly. Meeting dismissed. Time to remind the board who we really are. As the screens winked out, she slumped slightly in her chair. Thomas was there immediately, his hand warm on her shoulder. That was amazing, David said. already typing rapidly on his tablet. Social media's exploding. We're family is trending. Jen's people are scrambling. Good. Catherine straightened. Phase 1 complete. Emily, could I keep your drawing a little longer? I think the board needs to see it too. Emily beamed. Keep it forever. We can make more together. The simple promise of a future, more drawings, more moments, more family memories to create, filled Catherine's chest with warmth. She looked at the torn train tickets on the desk, remembering the desperate woman who'd bought them. David, what are my chances with the board? He checked his data. Before that speech, 50-50. Now, public sentiments with you. Chen's fighting. A losing battle, and he knows it. Thomas squeezed her shoulder. Whatever happens, you've already won what matters most. Catherine covered his hand with hers, feeling the weight of Sarah's ring against her heart, seeing Emily's drawing propped beside her corporate documents. Two worlds, no longer separate, but beautifully, perfectly merged. Yes, she agreed softly. I have. The board meeting opened like a chess game, each piece already in position. 12 faces filled Catherine's screen, with Marcus Chen's square prominently centered. His smile reminded her of a shark's, all teeth, no warmth. Catherine, he began, false concern dripping from every syllable. We've all been so worried. This pastoral retreat must have been very therapeutic. His camera angle deliberately showed his executive suite backdrop, a pointed contrast to her cabin setting. Thank you for your concern, Marcus. Catherine's voice was calm, warmed by the memory of morning cookies and bedtime stories. It's been illuminating in many ways. Illuminating enough to explain the 100 million in market cap we've lost? Board member Janet Walsh cut in. Or the acquisition? Deals falling apart? Actually, yes. Catherine pulled up her first slide, not a financial chart, but a photograph from the company's founding. Michael and I, day one. We had nothing but a garage, a dream, and a belief that technology should serve families, not replace them. Touching, Marcus interrupted, but sentiment doesn't pay shareholders. I have here documentation of irregular financial transactions, decisions that suggest emotional instability. You mean the Carter acquisition I blocked? Catherine smiled. The one where you had a hidden ownership stake through shell companies. Marcus's face flickered. David, off camera, gave her a thumbs up as he silently transmitted documents to the board members. Or perhaps you meant the offshore accounts you've been using to short our stock during my absence. Catherine continued, the ones you thought no one would trace? These accusations are fully documented, Catherine finished. My temporary retreat gave our security team time to complete their investigation. An investigation I ordered after Michael first suspected irregularities before his death. The board erupted into chaos. Janet Walsh was already reading the documents, her face darkening. 3 other board members were frantically texting their lawyers. But that's not why I'm here, Catherine said, her voice cutting through the noise. She held up Emily's drawing. This is why I'm here. A child's drawing? Marcus sneered, but his face had lost its confidence. Have you completely lost my family? Catherine interrupted firmly. Not by blood, but by choice. Just like Sterling Innovations is a family by choice. 20,000 employees who just showed us exactly why they choose to stay. She shared her screen, showing the flood of We're family posts, the personal stories, the global response to her earlier speech. While you were plotting takeovers, Marcus, our people were building something stronger than stock prices. The board's responsibility is to shareholders, Marcus tried, but Janet Walsh cut him off. Our responsibility is to the company's future. Janet leaned into her camera. Catherine, these allegations against Mr. Chen are extremely serious. Yes, Catherine agreed, and I'll work with authorities to pursue them fully, but right now I want to talk about tomorrow, about why Sterling Innovations exists. She walked them through her vision, not just profit projections, but impact metrics, innovation powered by purpose, not just market share. She showed them Emily's drawing again, but this time alongside pictures from employees worldwide, children, families, lives touched by their technology. Michael used to say, technology should feel like a warm cup of hot chocolate on a cold day, Catherine said softly. Comforting, nurturing, bringing people together. I forgot that after I lost him and James, became the ice queen everyone wanted. But you know what happens to ice? She touched Sarah's ring, drawing strength from it. Through the open study door, she could see Thomas and Emily playing a quiet board game, waiting for her. It melts, she continued, and underneath you find something real, something true. She faced the board directly. I'm not the same leader I was 2 weeks ago. I'm better because I remember why we're here. Janet Walsh spoke first. I move to dismiss all allegations against Catherine Sterling and launch a formal investigation into Marcus Chen's activities. Seconded, came another voice, then another. Marcus's face was purple with rage. This is ridiculous. She's clearly emotionally compromised. No, Marcus, Catherine cut in. For the first time in 2 years, I'm emotionally whole, and you're fired. The vote was decisive, 10-2 in Catherine's favor. As board members disconnected, Janet lingered. Catherine, that family, in the background. She smiled. They look good. On you. After the last screen went dark, Catherine sat quietly, feeling the weight of the moment. Thomas appeared beside her, Emily in his arms. Did you win? Emily asked. Catherine reached for them both. Yes, sweetheart. We all did. Does that mean you have to go back to Seattle? The question hung in the air. Thomas met Catherine's eyes, and she saw her own future reflected there. Actually, she said, I was thinking Seattle might need to get used to virtual board meetings, because this, she pulled them both close, this is home. Outside, the media crews were already getting word of Marcus's downfall and Catherine's triumph. But inside the cabin, in the warmth of her new family's embrace, the Ice Queen had melted completely, leaving behind something far more powerful, a heart on fire with purpose and love. The envelope arrived 3 days after Catherine's boardroom victory, addressed to Thomas in crisp legal handwriting. He found it in their mailbox, while Catherine was on a video call in the study and Emily was at school. Inside was a deed to the cabin, the same deed he'd been making payments on for years, but with a stamp marked paid in full across the front. His hands trembled as he read the accompanying letter from the bank. The remaining balance on his mortgage cleared. The past due payments resolved. The property was his, free and clear. He was still staring at the papers when Catherine's call ended. She emerged from the study to find him at the kitchen table, the deed spread before him. You had no right, he said quietly. Catherine paused in the doorway. I had the ability to help. I didn't ask for help. His voice was tight with emotion. We were managing. Catherine moved to the table. Thomas, I saw the final notices, the juggled bills. You were 1 bad month away from losing everything. Everything except my pride. He looked up at her. Is that what this is about? Making sure your new family has a proper home? The moment. He said it. He regretted it. Catherine flinched as if he'd struck her, but she didn't retreat. Your pride? She said softly. Is that worth more than Emily's security? Than knowing she'll always have her home, her memories of Sarah, this place? You've built together? Thomas stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The same window where he'd first seen Catherine through the snow, where Emily pressed her face to watch for deer, where Sarah used to stand and sing while doing dishes. My whole life, he said finally. I've taken care of us, through Sarah's illness, through single parenthood, through everything. It's not about pride. It's about showing Emily that we don't need what? Love. Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. Because that's what this is, Thomas. Not charity. Love. He turned to face her. She wore one of Sarah's old sweaters, the sleeves slightly too short, Sarah's ring still hanging at her throat. She looked at home in their kitchen, as if she'd always belonged there. When Michael died, she continued, I had all the money in the world, But I couldn't buy what mattered. Family, purpose, joy. You and Emily gave me those things freely. You saved my life, my soul. She touched the deed lightly. This isn't about money. It's about making sure nothing ever threatens this sanctuary you've built. Catherine, let me finish. She moved closer. 2 weeks ago, I was ready to walk away from billions of dollars, from my whole life, because none of it meant anything. Then I found this cabin, this family, this love. You taught me what real value is. She smiled softly. Consider it a business. Investment. I'm investing in my happiness. Thomas felt his resistance crumbling. Emily can't know, not yet. She needs to understand the value of work, of earning. She already does. Catherine gestured around the cabin. Every repair you've made together, every garden you've planted, every memory you've built, that's what she'll remember, not the mortgage papers. He looked down at the deed again, seeing not just the legal document, but everything it represented. The home where Sarah had spent her last days, where Emily took her first steps, where he'd rebuilt their life piece by piece. I don't know how to accept this, he admitted. The same way you accepted me, Catherine said simply, with love instead of pride. She reached for his hand, and he let her take it. They stood together, looking out the window at the land that was now unquestionably his. Besides, she added with a slight smile, I might have selfish motives. Now that the board drama is settled, I need a permanent home office, somewhere with terrible Wi-Fi and excellent company. That startled a laugh from him. You're staying? What about Seattle, the company? I told you, they can adapt to virtual meetings. My family is here. She squeezed his hand. Unless you're planning to evict me from my investment property. The last of his tension melted away. He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, mingled with the cabin's perpetual hint of wood smoke. Stay, he whispered. Not because of the deed or the money or any of it. Just stay. I will. She lifted her face to his. But you have to do something for me. What's that? Accept that love doesn't make you weaker. She touched Sarah's ring. Someone very wise taught me that. Outside, they heard the school bus approaching. Emily would burst through the door any minute, full of stories and energy. Thomas carefully folded the deed and tucked it away. Partners? Catherine asked softly. Family, he corrected, and kissed her just as Emily's footsteps thundered up the porch steps. The magazine covers started appearing a week later. First in the business press, Ice Queen's Meltdown Miracle, how Catherine Sterling's mountain retreat saved Sterling Innovations. Then the human interest angles, Frozen Lake to Warm Heart, a modern fairy tale. By the time People magazine ran with Love in the Mountains, the CEO and the Craftsman, Emily was collecting the covers in a scrapbook. Look, she bounded into the kitchen one morning, brandishing the latest tabloid. They called us the real-life Sound of Music family. But, Daddy, they got it wrong. You don't know how to yodel. Thomas nearly choked on his coffee while Catherine tried to hide her smile behind her laptop screen. She was on a video call with the Tokyo office, but her executives were used to Emily's impromptu appearances by now. Sweetheart, Catherine muted her microphone. Maybe we should let Daddy finish his breakfast before showing him the yodeling article. But they want us to be on TV, all of us. Emily thrust the magazine at them. Ellen and Good Morning America. And no, both adults spoke simultaneously, then shared a knowing look. But why? Emily's lower lip trembled slightly. Don't you want people to know about our family? Catherine ended her call early and pulled Emily into her lap, a gesture that had become natural over the past months. Our family isn't for show. Sweetheart, it's just for us. Besides, Thomas added, real love stories don't need a studio audience. But the world, it seemed, disagreed. Reporters still camped at the end of their road, hoping for glimpses of the fairy tale. Tourism to their small town had tripled. The general store now sold T-shirts reading, Love Found Her in Montana, with a silhouette of their cabin. Mae Wilson was in her glory. Another interview request, she announced when they stopped in for groceries. Oprah this time. I told them, what I tell everyone, you're just folks living your life. Thanks, Mae. Thomas loaded their groceries, while Catherine helped Emily count out her penny candy allowance. The store had become a safe haven, the one place in town where they were. Still just the Millers and Sterling Miller, as Emily had taken to introducing Catherine. Although, May continued, you might want to see today's Wall Street Journal. Sterling Innovation stock hit an all-time high. Seems your family first restructuring is paying off. Catherine accepted the paper with a smile. The headline read, Sterling's Remote Revolution, CEO's Mountain Office sparks corporate culture change. They like that you're human now, Emily said wisely, sorting her candy. Daddy says humans are better than ice queens anyway. The bell above the door chimed as a group of tourists entered, phones already raised for pictures. May shooed them. Out with practiced efficiency. Go on, she told Catherine and Thomas. Use the back door. I'll run interference. In the truck, heading home, Emily studied Catherine's face. Are you sad that people won't leave us alone? Catherine reached back to squeeze her hand. No, sweetheart, because they don't have what matters. They have pictures and stories, but we have morning hot chocolate and bedtime songs and your daddy's terrible jokes. Hey, Thomas protested, but he was smiling. My jokes are dad jokes. They're supposed to be terrible. At home, they found more. Interview requests in their mailbox, along with a thick envelope from Emily's school. Inside was her family culture project, an A-plus paper about modern families and love that finds you. Mrs. Henderson wants to know if you'll both come for career day, Emily said hopefully. She says the class could learn about business and carpentry, and how sometimes the best families are the ones you build yourself. Catherine and Thomas exchanged glances. That, Catherine said carefully, we can do. Later that night, after Emily was asleep, they sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge. Catherine's laptop glowed with another article about their fairy tale romance, but she closed it in favor of leaning against Thomas's shoulder. You know what none of these stories get right? She mused. What's that? They all talk about the CEO finding love in the mountains, but they miss the real story, about a broken woman finding her way home. Thomas kissed her temple. Maybe that's because home found you first. From Emily's room came the sound of her talking in her sleep, a habit that never failed to make both parents smile. Inside, Sarah's ring hung on a special hook by Catherine's corporate awards, a reminder of the bridges built between past and present, loss and love. The press will move on eventually, Thomas said softly. Find some new fairy tale to chase. Good. Catherine snuggled closer. Because I'd rather be living one than reading about it. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the Montana sky. Neither made a wish. They didn't need to anymore. The architectural plans spread across the kitchen table were Catherine's surprise for a quiet Sunday morning. Emily peered at them intently, finger tracing the neat lines while Thomas studied Catherine's face. Before you say anything, Catherine began, this isn't about changing what we have. It's about making room for what we've become. The plans showed their cabin, but thoughtfully expanded, a proper home office with state-of-the-art communications equipment, a larger kitchen where they could all cook together, a craft room for Emily's growing artistic pursuits. But the core of the cabin, its heart and history, remained untouched. See? Emily pointed excitedly. My room stays exactly the same. And look, Daddy, the porch gets bigger so we can have more swing seats. Thomas picked up the detailed drawings. The craftsmanship would be all local work. He recognized the style of Pete Anderson, the town's master carpenter. The materials were carefully chosen to match the cabin's existing character. Even the proposed technology additions were designed to blend seamlessly into the rustic setting. You've put a lot of thought into this, he said quietly. Catherine nodded. I wanted to honor what you and Sarah built, what you and Emily maintained, but I also wanted to create space for our future without losing an inch of our past. Emily had moved on to the color swatches Catherine had brought. These blues are like the lake in summer, she observed, and these browns match Daddy's wooden hearts he makes. Thomas's hand-carved wooden hearts had become a family tradition. He made them from fallen branches after each significant moment. Emily's Achievements, Catherine's corporate victories, quiet family milestones. They hung in a growing collection on the living room wall, marking their journey together. The company board actually helped me realize something, Catherine continued, sitting beside them. They kept asking how I could run a tech giant from a mountain cabin, but they were asking the wrong question. The real question was, how could I not? This is where the inspiration comes from, where the real innovation happens. She pulled out another sketch, her ideas for a small tech education center in town, offering coding classes and internet access to local kids. Success isn't just about stock prices. It's about building something meaningful, something that lasts, like family, Emily said wisely, now arranging the color swatches in a rainbow pattern. Exactly like family. Catherine touched Sarah's ring, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. So, what do you think? Be honest. Thomas was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the careful preservation of Sarah's garden in the landscaping. And plans. The proposed changes wouldn't erase their past. They would build upon it, just as their love had done. I think, he said slowly, that Sarah would say we're thinking too small. Catherine blinked in surprise. Too small? He pulled Emily into his lap. What do you think, Sunshine? Should we show Catherine your drawings too? Emily bounced up and ran to her room, returning with her own set of carefully crayoned plans. She spread them next to Catherine's professional blueprints. See? Emily pointed proudly. A treehouse office for Catherine, connected to the house by a bridge, and a bigger garden where we can grow more flowers like Mommy loved, and a special workshop where Daddy can teach other kids how to make wooden hearts. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she looked between the two sets of plans, her practical additions and Emily's dreams, both born from the same love of their shared home. You've been planning too? She asked softly. Thomas wrapped an arm around her. We thought maybe you were worried about changing things, about disturbing what was here before. So Emily and I started dreaming a little, showing how ready we were for change. As long as it's change we make together, Emily added. Firmly, Catherine looked at their plans side by side, the professional and the crayoned, the practical and the dreamlike. What if, she said slowly, we combined them? Keep the solid foundations, but add some magic. Emily's eyes lit up. Can we really have a treehouse office? Maybe not exactly like your drawing, Catherine laughed, but something close, something that reminds us every day that the best plans leave room for dreams. Thomas gathered them both close. Outside, spring was bringing new life to Sarah's garden. Inside, their home was growing too. Not through destruction, but through careful addition, like rings in a tree's heart. Well then, he said, should we call Pete Anderson, see what he thinks about building dreams? Yes, Emily cheered. And can we paint my door purple? Catherine met Thomas's eyes over their daughter's head. Their daughter. The thought no longer scared her. Nothing scared her now, not with this foundation beneath her feet, this love surrounding her heart. Purple door, treehouse office, and all the dreams we can build, she promised. Together. The marriage license arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between Catherine's quarterly reports and Emily's permission slip for the spring camping trip. Thomas found it when sorting the mail, the official seal catching the morning light. He stood in the kitchen, holding it with the same care he used for his finest woodworking projects. Is that it? Emily's voice came from behind him. The paper that makes it real? Thomas turned to find his daughter clutching a small wooden box, one he recognized from his workshop. Emily Rose Miller, have you been snooping? She shook her head solemnly. Not snooping, helping. Catherine needed a special box for Mommy's ring for the ceremony. You always say the most important things need a proper home. His throat tightened. Of course, Catherine had enlisted Emily's help. Of course, they'd thought of Sarah's ring, which had moved from Catherine's neck to become her engagement ring, a bridge between past and future that felt right to all of them. Speaking of Catherine, he managed, where is she? On her morning call with Tokyo, they're arguing about time zones again. Emily set the box on the table carefully. She said real family is worth waking up at 4 a.m. for. The license seemed to glow in the morning light. No fancy ceremony for them. They'd decided on a simple gathering by the lake where they'd first met. May Wilson had gotten ordained online. About time I put all this matchmaking experience to good use. And the whole town had respectfully agreed to keep the media away. Catherine's voice drifted from her office, warm with laughter despite the early hour. Yes, Mr. Tanaka, I understand it's dinner time there, but my daughter has a school presentation this afternoon, and I won't miss it. We'll reconvene at a time that works for all our families. Daughter. The word still made Thomas's heart skip. Catherine had used it naturally, unconsciously, her love for Emily as real as the license in his hands. Emily tugged at his sleeve. Can I show you something? Before Catherine finishes her call, she led him to her room, to the desk where she did her homework and drew her endless pictures. From the bottom drawer, she pulled out a folder labeled Family Project, Final Version. Mrs. Henderson said we could update our projects if our families changed, Emily explained, opening the folder. Look, the original crayon drawing was there, the one that had helped Catherine win back her company, but beside it lay a new one, more detailed, more confident. The 3 figures remained, but now they stood by the lake instead of the cabin. Catherine wore Sarah's ring in the picture, and all 3 figures had wide smiles touched with crayon gold. The first one was about finding family, Emily said. This one's about keeping it. From the study came the sound of Catherine's chair pushing back, her call finished. Thomas quickly wiped his eyes. Emily, he said softly, when did you get so wise? From having 2 mummies, she replied simply. One in heaven watching over us, and one here helping us remember how to be happy. Catherine appeared in the doorway, still in her morning robe, hair slightly mussed from her early call. Why are you 2 hiding in here? I thought we had a busy day ahead. Licenses to file, presentations to attend, futures to plan. Show her, Emily urged, pushing the drawings toward Catherine. Thomas watched as Catherine took in Emily's art, saw the moment she recognized the ring on her drawn hand, the lake in the background, the golden smiles. She sank into Emily's desk chair, pulling their daughter into a tight hug. It's perfect, she whispered, absolutely perfect. The real thing will be better, Emily assured her. May's been practicing her speech and everything. I heard her in the store yesterday, telling the tourists to please respect our privacy because real love needs room to grow. Catherine laughed, the sound as warm as summer rain. May Wilson, protector of privacy, will wonders never cease? Speaking of wonders, Thomas held up the license. Look what arrived. Catherine's eyes softened. Is that just needs our signatures? Then it's official. He paused. Unless the CEO of Sterling Innovations has second thoughts about becoming Mrs. Miller. Actually, Catherine stood, drawing Emily up with her. I was thinking Sterling Miller. For all of us. If that's okay, Emily's eyes widened. Me too? You especially. Catherine met Thomas's gaze. A new name for our new family. Honoring where we've been, celebrating where we're going. Thomas crossed the small room in 2 strides, gathering them both in his arms. The license crinkled slightly between them, but it didn't matter. The paper was just a formality. The real marriage had been happening all along, in shared hot chocolate and bedtime stories, in wooden hearts and crayon drawings, in the quiet moments between corporate calls and school presentations. Sterling Miller, he tested the words, has a nice ring to it. Like bells, Emily agreed. Wedding bells. Catherine touched Sarah's ring, a gesture of gratitude rather than grief now. Perfect rings, she corrected softly, like the kind that show you exactly where you belong. 1 year later, the family photo sat on Catherine's desk in her treehouse office, not exactly like Emily's crayon design, but close enough to make her smile every morning. The image showed the 3 Sterling Millers by the lake in autumn leaves, dancing around them like nature's confetti. Emily's smile was pure joy. Thomas's eyes crinkled with happiness. And Catherine looked nothing like the ice queen of business magazines past. "Mom!" Emily's voice carried up through the glass and wood structure. "Dad says dinner's ready, and your Tokyo team can survive without you for one night." Catherine smiled, closing her laptop. The office, connected to their expanded cabin by a covered bridge, had become her favorite place to work. Close enough to hear Emily practicing piano, to smell Thomas's cooking, to feel part of their daily rhythm while running. Her company, Sterling Innovations, had just been named one of the best family-friendly workplaces in America. The article mentioned their CEO's unconventional approach, running a tech giant from a Montana mountain, prioritizing work-life balance, and proving that success didn't require sacrifice of soul. She descended the spiral staircase into their kitchen, now warm with the scent of Thomas's signature stew. The recipe had been Sarah's, shared by her mother after the wedding, another thread connecting past and present, another way of keeping memories alive while making new ones. "The coding class graduates tomorrow," Emily announced over dinner. "Dad's been helping them build their own computers from scratch." The town's tech center had become a model for rural education initiatives. Thomas taught woodworking and hardware basics while local kids learned programming. Catherine's corporate team provided resources, but the heart of the project was pure. Miller, now Sterling Miller, Innovation. Speaking of graduation, Thomas reached for Catherine's hand across the table. "Show her, Emily." Emily produced her latest school project. The assignment had been simple. "What success means to me." Her essay began. "Some people think success is about money or power or being famous, but my family knows the truth. Success is about finding your way home, even when home isn't what you expected." Catherine felt happy, tears threatening. On the wall behind Emily, their collection of wooden hearts had grown. One for the wedding, one for Emily's first piano recital, one for Catherine's parent company initiative, one for each milestone they'd shared. "Mrs. Henderson gave me an A+, Emily beamed. And she said sometimes the best teachers are the ones who had to learn their own lessons first. Thomas squeezed Catherine's hand. "Smart woman, Mrs. Henderson." Later, after Emily was in bed, they sat on their expanded porch swing, watching stars emerge above the lake. Sarah's ring caught the starlight as Catherine laced her fingers through her husband's. "Any regrets?" Thomas asked softly. "About choosing this life?" Catherine thought about her day. Corporate decisions made with humanity instead of ice. Family. Dinner full of laughter. Their daughter's wise words about success and home. She thought about the woman who had walked onto a frozen lake, ready to give up, and the life that had thawed her heart. "Only one," she murmured, nestling closer. "Oh, I wish I'd fallen through that ice sooner." Above them, a shooting star streaked across the Montana sky. This time, they did make a wish, not for themselves, but for others lost in winter, searching for their way home to spring.